Sit back and throw one back with your pinky in the air and a middle finger to the world, and join me, the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, as we look back on this day in pro wrestling history. But before we do, put that drink down, like, share, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get our wrestling history on. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is September 15th, and we're going to start off as we always do on a positive note. That's right, these are your pro wrestling birthdays. 1937, King Curtis Iukea. 1947, Holla Holla, it's Teddy Long. 1954, watch out, it's Adrian Adonis. 1961, Quebec's own Phil LaFawn. And last but not least, 1987, Ring of Honor's Rhett Titus. Of course, on the flip side of that coin, your pro wrestling deaths for September 15th. 1997, Big Bulldog Brower. Alright, enough of the sad stuff. It's time to get to the meat and potatoes. That's right, these are your pro wrestling history highlights for September 15th. A short trip in the Wayback Machine today as we start in 1973, where we see Worldwide Wrestling Federation World Heavyweight Champion Pedro Morales defeat George the Animal Steele in a steel cage match at the Boston Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Grabbing my boombox and going to the 80s, 1984. The World Wrestling Council held their 11th anniversary show in Sam Hiram Bertham Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico, drawing over 29,000 fans. With a main event of PWF All Japan Tag Team Champions Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen versus Abdul the Butcher and Carlos Colon going to a double disqualification. Moving ahead 2 years to 1986, Black Bart defeats Chris Adams in Los Angeles, California to win the World Class Wrestling World Heavyweight title. Actually, this was a phantom title change, as there was no show in Los Angeles. World Class simply put the title on Bart and made up the switch so that they could have the heel Bart drop the title to babyface Kevin Von Erich in Texas. Our final stop in the 80s, 1989. Sheik Braddock and Ron Starr defeat Jeff Jarrett and Matt Bourne for the USWA Tag Team titles in Dallas, Texas. Grabbing my flannel and going to the decade of grunge, 1992. The WWF holds a show in conjunction with the War promotion in Japan. In the main event, Ric Flair vs. Tenryu goes to a draw in a 3 falls match. Tenryu wins the first fall, Flair wins the second, and both men were counted out in the third. Also on the show, Road Warrior Animal defeats the Beverly Brothers in a handicap match. During the bout, Animal aggravates a back injury and ends up retiring from the ring. He would not return to wrestling for over 3 years. Fast forwarding to 1996, WCW's Fall Brawl pay-per-view was held in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, with a main event of Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Sting, NWO Sting, defeating Lex Luger, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and the real Sting in a War Games match, when NWO Sting forced Luger to submit. Going into the match, Luger, Flair, and Anderson accused Sting of being a traitor since they believed Sting, actually it was the NWO Sting, had been in the NWO limo. When War Games took place, Sting came out, cleaned house of the NWO, who were winning the match at the time, but then walked out on his partners since they had not believed him. Left with 4-on-3 advantage, the NWO dominated, with the NWO Sting forcing Luger to submit to the Scorpion Deathlock. Randy Savage ran out and attacked Hogan, but was beaten down and spray-painted, as was Elizabeth, by the NWO. The babyfaces not believing Sting and Sting's subsequent walkout was the beginning of the metamorphosis into the Crow character that he would use for the remainder of his career. The next night on Nitro, he did an interview, his last spoken words for months, proclaiming himself a free agent. then began the practice of watching shows from the rafters, starting the build to his eventual showdown with Hulk Hogan. That next year, in 1997, Curt Hennig defeats Steve Mongo McMichael for the WCW United States Heavyweight title in Charlotte, North Carolina. This would be Hennig's only singles title reign during his WCW run. And last but not least, 1998, Jacqueline defeats Sable for the vacant WWF Women's title in Sacramento, California, during an edition of Raw. The title had been vacant since 1995, when Alundra Blaze left WWF. In fact, the WWF had a new title belt created since Blaze had taken the strap with her and unceremoniously dropped it in a trash can on her WCW debut. The Raw taping also saw X-Pac defeat D'Lo Brown to win the WWF European title. Those were your short but sweet pro wrestling history highlights for September 15th. I'm the Eclectic Gentleman, Stephen Watts, and I'll see you tomorrow.